Hey everyone, welcome to episode 106 of Tuesdays with Perry. I'm going to get Perry on the line in just a second. We're going to talk a little foreign policy. We have Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, telling Trump that he lives in a disinformation space created by Russia. And then we're going to talk a little bit about Romania and much more coming up right now. We're going to get Perry on the line. See if we can do that.
Hello.
Hey, Perry, welcome to the podcast today. Good to hear from you, my friend. How is it going on down there in sunny Florida?
Oh, well, it was a typical winter day, just like back home, except you have to add another 45 degrees. It was a very gloomy, gray, and eventually rainy late afternoon. But I was still sitting in my shorts when it happened.
Better than us up here in the cold. All right, so we're going to start out with, obviously, Trump had a team meet in Saudi Arabia with Marco Rubio, met with the Russians. Mike Waltz was down there. You're a former congressman from Florida, now the national security advisor. Mike Waltz was down there as well. They met with Lavrov and the Russians, and we're getting thumbs up. So they're getting ready to set up a summit for Putin and Trump, and it seems like the heads are exploding already. Zelensky said that Trump is living in a disinformation space created by Russia, when it seems like Zelensky is going to be cut out of the peace deal. So why don't we start there? And with the added caveat that the ball really got rolling with J.D. Vance when J.D. Vance spoke at the Munich security conference, and he said, we're not doing it the old way. There's going to be no censorship. And
I strongly advise all of your viewers, I'm sure it's on your YouTube channel, and if it isn't, shame on you, Rudy. They need to watch his speech in its entirety, because it was brilliant. Right. It was absolutely brilliant.
Well, he told the stuffy intelligence heads at the Munich security conference, a lot of the alliance there in Europe is known as the Club of Bern, and that's Bern, Switzerland. There has been a connection between all the Western intelligence agencies since the end of the First World War.
That's right.
So what do you think? You think there's going to be peace in Russia? What do you think of the outcome is going to be? We all know about NATO's involvement in the war going on in Ukraine. What do you think is going to be the settlement? I could call it from here, but it doesn't seem like Zelensky is going to be happy.
Well, of course he's not going to be happy, because he was foolish enough to listen to his generals rather than listen to smart people like Colonel, I think first name is Dan Davis, who tried to get word to him a year and a half ago in 2023, when they actually had the Russians on the run. They literally had the Russians on the ropes. They didn't have the capability of pushing them back over and out of Crimea, but they were able to push them all the way back to the Donbass. And at that point, the smart military minds in this country were saying, now's the time to sue for peace. Of course, they weren't heard by the numbskull that was running the Department of Defense, nor the mashed potatoes that was sitting in the White House. And it is for that reason that they find themselves now in the predicament that they are now in. And so they are not going to get what they want. Whether Donald Trump wanted it to happen for them or not, Russia has made it clear that they're not interested in putting things back the way they were. And if I were Putin, I can't. You and I have had this conversation on at least 2 or 3 other podcasts that you've had me on. There is no reason, for a multitude of reasons. The 2 most important is Russian security measures regarding the Black Sea Fleet, and secondarily, what's known as historical Russian-speaking people who live inside Crimea. So Putin's made it clear, I'm not taking my forces away from there. This is now part of Russia, and it's going to stay that way. Trump already knows that. I'm sure the reason why Lavrov and the other members of his negotiating team were so happy was because, Marco and Mike made it clear. We get your security concerns. So Crimea stays in your hands.
Right.
And that's going to, and so now the question is, what can Trump negotiate on behalf of the Ukrainians as givebacks in good faith? That's where it's going to get tricky, because, it's unfortunate, Rudy, that the vast majority of Americans, and by vast majority, I mean in the hundreds of millions, do not understand the historical significance of this specific geographical area, whether it's Ukraine or whether it's Russia or whether it's Crimea itself or the entire area. And because most Americans don't understand that very important part of history, it's very difficult for most people, especially with the type of media that we have in this country, for them to really wrap their minds or their heads around where the Russians are coming from. You and I aren't the only ones,
Right.
okay?
Right.
But it's going to be podcasters like yourself that are really going to have to explain this in more detail. Having said that, so getting back to what Trump can give back to the Ukrainians, if he can convince the Russians that, look, I know where you're at. I have no disagreement with your views, your security concerns. What do I need to do to guarantee you that you will not have to face a potential war with NATO 5 years from now when I'm no longer president? And that's where the negotiating is going to be very difficult. Okay. Contrary to what everybody on our side of the aisle and the Democrat side of the aisle are saying about how they're going after Trump right now, both sides. I mean, even both your favorite and my favorite senator from Louisiana, Senator Kennedy, said he disagrees with Trump on the issue of who started the war. Everybody is beating up Trump, saying, because he said Ukraine started this war.
Right.
And you know something? You and I are the 2 people having a conversation on this Wednesday night, knowing that's true.
Well, to some extent, yeah. To some extent, yeah.
Well, right. I mean, you have to go back, not so much to 2007, but like I said last week, for 20 years, from 1994 to 2014, before the second and successful revolution within Ukraine.
The Maidan.
Right? Correct. Up until that point in 2014, Russia's security concerns were maintained because of the type of governmental structure that existed at the time in Ukraine. They were friendly to Russia, but they wanted to be part of the EU, and Vladimir Putin had no concerns about them being part of the EU. He just didn't want them to be part of NATO.
Right.
Since 2014, that is when a lot of people started saying, not so much during Trump's first term in office, but certainly there were mumblings both within our country and within NATO that Ukraine was going to eventually become part of NATO. Ukraine was going to become part of NATO. And then, of course, that was put on steroids while Uncle Joe was president. Right. This is why Russia was left with no choice. And this is something I think you really need to talk about on one of your daily shows down the road, how for many years, Vladimir Putin said, this is a red line you will not cross.
Yeah, I say it all. I say it all the time. Yeah.
Right. And, the lack of respect NATO at whole was giving him, thinking, well, what are you going to do about it? You're no longer the military power you once were. We're just going to do whatever we damn well please. And if we want Ukraine to be part of NATO, well, damn it, we're going to make them part of NATO. And he said, okay, if you do that, you're not going to hold me responsible for what I end up having to do because you leave me no choice.
Right.
And that's what brought us to the beginning of hostilities 3 years ago. Next week.
Yeah.
Next week.
Yeah. I think, go ahead.
And so this is the reason why the Russians left the meetings today feeling very good, because Trump gets it, and he's given instructions to his negotiating team to say, we understand where Russia's coming from, no argument there. Now, what can we do to save as much of Ukraine as we can for the Ukrainians? And that's where the sticking points are going to come. This is the reason why Putin has said over the past month, maybe 2 months, even before Trump took the oath of office again, I'm open to negotiations. I'm willing to talk, but I'm not going to stop my push. Yeah. Because he knows the Ukrainians don't have the ability to stop it. So it's going to be up to Trump to figure a way out of this box that we are all in. I think it can be done. As for Zelensky, look, he has no choice but to say what he said in the past 24 hours, because prior to the real negotiating, he doesn't have a seat at the table. When the real negotiations start, he'll be there. But he'll be there as a silent partner.
As a puppet.
That's right. And, the other point to make on all of this is, well, one of the other thing that Putin said last week, before I will even consider a peace treaty, there has to be an election.
Yeah.
This is the reason why Trump said in the last 2 days, I can see that happening, but first there has to be a truce, a cessation of hostilities so that there can be elections. The problem with that for Zelensky is he's a dictator right now. He hasn't had democratic elections in 6 years?
Well, 3 years.
Well, it was
Longer?
due 3 years ago, but they canceled the election.
Yeah.
So he's been in office now almost 2 full terms as president. He was only entitled to one, and he continues to maintain the authority of president because he canceled the elections that should have been held a few years ago.
Yeah.
And so what is Putin saying? I will not agree to any terms until there is a new president, whether it's Zelensky, which it won't be, or whether it's someone else.
Right.
And Zelensky doesn't want to give up that power. So
Yeah.
this is going to be very interesting. It's not going to be easy, but if anybody can pull it off, it's going to be Trump and his team.
Yeah. Yeah. It was definitely a NATO operation. The thing is, Zelensky is a puppet, but the question keeps coming up in my mind: who is he a puppet of exactly? He's not a puppet of the Pentagon. Maybe the CIA. Is it NATO? Is it Germany? Is it the governments of those European countries? Is it the EU? Is it a corporate, the corporate fascist head of the EU? Is it Klaus Schwab? Who is Zelensky a puppet of?
Well, if I were to throw out a conspiracy group, I would say it's simply NATO.
Right.
And NATO, although, a lot of people don't understand what NATO is. Yes, they know it stands for the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. What does that really mean? You have there are I've lost count of how many countries. Romania is part of it. The former Baltics are part of it. There's over 20 nations in Europe
but now
that are part.
Now a subgroup has emerged out of NATO, and it's called the what is it called? The Northern Group. So inside of NATO is called the Northern Group, and I guess it's like the Security Council of the UN. It's the Supreme Group, so it's like Germany and England and the United States. It's the Northern Group. So
and Britain.
Right, exactly, the UK. Yeah. So
and so what I wanted to point out here is, yes, every representative of each of those countries within NATO ultimately answers to the democratically elected office holders of their own country. They still have their own governance.
Yeah.
And, there's a reason why there's the head of NATO, which, of course, it changes I think it's every year, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. It might be a 2-year term for all I know. But they speak as an organization on behalf of all member countries.
Yeah, ideally. I think it's
right.
I think it's more run by the EU central bank, and a lot of the players in that supranational organizations. I think a lot of the sovereignty of individual countries in Europe have been eroded. Not that they don't have any say, but only because the government and the governments are dealing with intelligence agencies, specifically the BND in Germany and MI6,
you have
MI6,
right.
and some of the other big ones. So it's my firm belief that those intelligence agencies are actually work for people outside the government.
I tend to agree with you there too.
Right. So if you follow the train, it's going to go back to, the European Central Bank, big banks, and the monetary vehicles there in the EU, and part of the UN included the World Bank and all the supranational organizations. So it goes back to the WEF, whether we like it or not.
I agree. So that's who Zelensky's really counting on, because they're the ones more than Macron, more than what is it, Kolb, that is now the chancellor of Germany, more than the others, and that's the other thing. NATO is not in full agreement on this. You don't think Georgia Maloney is on board with this, do you?
No,
of course not.
No, and she's even she's voiced her opposition to the
Right.
war, as did Orban in Hungary, and and the far right leader in Romania, that apparently was denied the election because he was pro, or at least anti-war. He was pro-Russia, and a stance, at least understanding Russia. And so that election was canceled. I know you wanted to talk about that. Apparently, the puppet president had to step down because of populist resentment. And so now they're calling for a new election in the spring.
Right.
You want to fill us in on what happened there? I mean, with the original election, I mean, we have far right. I used that as an.
I cringed a little bit when you said far right, because I do not want to use the lexicon of the left.
Right, conservative. Usually,
he is
I say
conservative,
nationalist.
Right.
So.
Right, nationalist, populist.
Right.
He. Look. Again, if you were to take his position because of his geographic location of the world and compare that to the United States, and we kind of touched on this last week with regard to the southern border and how would we feel as Americans if China had suddenly put bases in Mexico. Okay? He has to live in what should be a very stable part of the world. And if NATO were to stop threatening Mother Russia, it would be stable again.
Right.
All right. So if you juxtapose, if this were us and we had to worry about what is going on in Mexico and the possibility of the Red Army coming over our border because they want to get to the Canadians for whatever reason. Do we really want to have a situation like that? Of course not. Neither does he. He wants a safe, quiet, prosperous, not just Romania, not just Eastern Europe, but a prosperous EU. What better way than to make peace with the Russians? And I mean a sustainable peace. You know, because of what Uncle Joe did 4 years ago, we have pushed, over the past 4 years, we have pushed Russia right into the arms of President Xi. And the Russians no longer trust Western Europe or the United States. And here's a news flash for everybody. We have a border with Russia too, called the Aleutian Islands. And there is one of those islands is shared by Russian and American troops. Most people don't know that. The Aleutian Islands don't end in American territory. The far western, or at that point eastern, islands, there's 2 or 3, plus the one shared, belong to Russia. So you ought to think about that when you look at Putin cross-eyed and say, you fucking commie pinko fascists want to kill you. That's the reason why they can fly their backfire bombers over Alaskan airspace. That's how close we are to them.
Yep.
So imagine if we had to really worry about being attacked by Russia.
Yeah.
And if we went into it, God forbid we actually end up in a hot war, we are going to be attacked on our West Coast.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's how close they are to us.
And our East Coast. I mean, they have submarines all over the fucking place.
Yeah, but I'm talking about bombers.
Yeah. Well, they're going to hit with the submarines first, and it's going to be, you got 8 minutes if you live on the coast. And those subs are in the Atlantic and they're off the Pacific, and then the bombers will roll in, after we're sitting there with our friggin', God forbid we don't even want to get there. That's the whole point. There's no reason. There's enough to go out around for everybody. I think organizations like NATO should be disbanded. If we need to create another alliance, we could certainly do that. But the mission statement for NATO hasn't changed since the Cold War, since the Soviet Union, and that's just wrong, I think.
And I'll tell you something. We talked about this at least a month ago, maybe longer. There was a window of opportunity while Clinton was president. And we talked about this with Yeltsin. And after Yeltsin stepped down and Putin became president, he actually wanted the opportunity to come into NATO.
Yeah.
I don't know if he really meant it, if he was sincere, but when that request was put to Clinton directly, Clinton's response was, "Well, that's really interesting. I'm going to get back to you on that." And then, of course, the spooks got a hold of Clinton and said, "Oh, no, that's never going to happen."
Yeah.
And so we still have a lot of those people in the deep state. They are still Cold War warriors for whatever reason. And look, I don't trust Putin either. But when he makes that comment, maybe it's not such a bad idea, but it'll never happen now. Now it won't happen. You did say the disbandment. I'm not so much for the disbandment of NATO, but I certainly want there to be a new mission statement because we don't have a Soviet boogeyman anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
We don't. And go ahead.
People don't know that. And the thing is, too, is they don't understand they're on the wrong side of communism. Communism is dead there now. And we should be worrying about communisms and communists like in Brazil, where the Brazilian government did exactly what they did here to Trump, to Bolsonaro. And now Bolsonaro, it looks like he still has popular support. But now they're charging him, I guess, with poisoning Lula da Silva. I mean, who was the communist that was jailed for corruption and now is president again. So I think in Romania or anywhere else where we have conservative governments, and even we could have allies in Russia to fight the global leftists, the internationalists, the globalists, that the only reason we're in this predicament to begin with is they want the natural resources, Russia, all to themselves, and in the meantime, they can make their dividends off the war machine.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
Yeah, so.
That's right.
All right, let's move on to Kash Patel. Now, I guess he just got out of committee, so they're going to vote on him tomorrow. I think I miscued the whole thing. At first, I thought he got out of committee last week. Do you know anything more about it? I know they secured a senator. I think it was it Tillis? I'm not sure which one it was. But he's got the green light, so I guess he's going to get confirmed. What are your thoughts?
No, it wasn't Tillis. It was, oh, crap. It's not going to come to me tonight, but whoever it was leaning against, and I don't know who got to him, but he has done a 180, and he now said that he will support the nomination.
I got it here. So Bill Cassidy of Louisiana.
It was Bill Cassidy. Okay. Makes sense.
So
So
they whipped all the votes in place, and
there's no other reason for them to say we're going to vote. They have to allow time to cure the vote. Obviously, they've met that requirement if they're going to vote tomorrow. So the Democrats have rolled over. They're not going to fight. And that's a good thing. That's, Cash, outside of Petey, is probably the most important nominee for the average American because of what he is going to do when it boils down to the cleaning up of the disgraceful Federal Bureau of Investigation. Heads are not only going to roll, there may be prosecutions. And what most people don't understand about Cash and why he is the perfect choice is because of what he does know. He was one of the chief investigators during Trump's first term. He's the one who found where all the bodies were. He knows where they're buried, and he's gonna dig them up. And there's going to be hell to pay, maybe going all the way back to Jimmy Comey. And wouldn't that be sweet? So, as important as Pam Bondi was, and speaking as a Floridian who had her for our Attorney General for 8 years, you do not want to fuck with that pretty blonde.
Yeah.
She will chew you up and spit you out right onto the wall and watch you peel the paint.
I'm hoping, I'm hoping that things just chill out. Obviously, all these organizations need to be cleaned out quite a bit because, I believe the FBI is corrupt. So I hope that he's able to do that, and he is the last puzzle piece, the last member of the dream team, so to speak.
Yep.
I'm hoping that he, cleans up the FBI, but he's the last missing piece. So now that all the pieces are in place, hopefully they can turn around not just government now, and with Doge cleaning up the government, but what they're trying to think about now is leaving stay-behind networks to keep the leftist infiltration at bay.
Right. And keep in mind, all these actions that you speak of will only work for however long a Republican sits in the White House.
Right.
And that's a scary thought, because as I've said for more than 30 years, there is nothing I share in common with the leftists of the Democrat Party. They do not even salute the same flag. Hell, they don't even know the words to the Star Spangled Banner when they're at their own national convention last year. So you have to be careful when you say, stay behind, because it all boils down to who controls the White House. The Democrats, and I don't want to get too far off of where you want to go tonight, Rudy, but the Democrats still have not woken up from the November 5th drubbing they took, this nightmare that they've been in since November 5th. They're still singing the same tune. They haven't changed at all. If you look at their stormtroopers that are going out and participating in these weak, feckless demonstrations all over Washington, D.C., whether Randy Weingarten is trying to bring down Linda McMahon and the Department of Education, or whether they're going in front of USAID, it doesn't matter. They are still singing the same tune they were singing 6 years ago,
Yeah.
8 years ago, 16 years ago.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah,
go ahead.
the electorate has had it. I have a poll sitting in front of me. Majority of Americans believe federal judges abusing their power is a threat to democracy. And the
And guess
other,
what?
yeah,
They can be impeached.
yeah, and they're getting ready to be impeached. I know there's
Right.
there's a committee preparing those lawsuits right now, and the majority of the public like what President Trump is doing. So they're on the wrong side of the argument. Even people like Carville and others are saying, hey, it's time to just chillax and figure out what we can do for the American people that Trump hasn't already done. And that's the quandary. You know, these stupid, like you said, it's not 2019 anymore.
Right. And they're not listening to him. They're not listening to any of the reasonable members of the Democrat hierarchy. I've said it repeatedly, they hate us.
Yeah.
And they can't stomach the restoration of the United States of America. We've said it before. We said it before the election. This election would determine whether or not we would wake up January 20th of 2025 and still recognize our country or not.
Right.
Had it gone the other way, imagine what would be taking place.
I can't.
Exactly.
I can't.
And so you have when you have people like Stephen A. Smith,
right?
I happen to love Stephen A. because he's one of the smartest guys in sports commentary. He knows his industry. And, you know, he and Rush were good friends. Rush was a mentor of his. Stephen A. has said repeatedly, I would have never amounted to where I am today if not for Rush Limbaugh. He took me aside and he said, Stephen, you have no clue of just how talented you are. Start acting like that when it comes to negotiating your next contract. Trust me, they will give you whatever you want. And he listened to Rush, and that's why he is who he is in sports commentary today. Yeah. When you have Democrats like Stephen A. Smith telling the Democrats, go fuck yourselves, because, and he has said publicly in the last 4 weeks, I'm now sorry I didn't vote for Trump.
Yeah, yeah. Well, he told them, what was it, tonight or last night? He said, they fucking suck.
Mm-hmm.
The Democrats suck. They just suck, and they do. And Carville didn't take to that very well.
No, but, I mean, he's actually toying with the idea of running. Yeah. Well, you know what? You know, I don't agree with Stephen A. Smith on a lot of things, but I would say probably 50% of what he says, he agrees with me. I can live with a Democrat like that. Yeah. I might not support his candidacy, but I can live with a guy like that. He loves this country. Okay? So
yeah, but
when you have guys like him who are bona fide Democrats now saying, I'm never going back to you.
Yeah.
Not unless you guys figure your way out of this box you put our party in.
Well, they're bowing.
That's a good thing.
Yeah, they're bowing to progressives. I mean, and the transgender thing, that's a loser. I have nothing against transgender people, but it's a loser to pin your policies, your domestic policies on that. That's a loser politically.
Correct.
So,
correct.
You know, they went along with the extremists, and now we're finding out how extreme transgender people really are with these recent murders. I want to close out with Kathy Hochul. So Trump just nixed the congestion pricing in New York City. Lee Zeldin just found, what was it, $8 billion squirreled away in the EPA. So Lee Zeldin and Hochul are going at it, and now Trump's weighed in. And now, what else you got for me?
Well, You got Duffy told Hochul today, hey, you're in violation of federal law because you don't have the authority to put these tolls on the roads you've set, because those particular roads are considered federal highways. You don't have the authority to put these congestion tolls where you put them. So they're coming down. And of course, Hochul's like, over my dead body. Well, it's been nice knowing you. Because what's going to happen is Trump's going to say, all right, well, you know, that 5 cent a gallon tax that every state gets since 1984, well, you're not going to get that money anymore to manage your roads. You figure out how you're going to pay for it. And you're not going to get DOT money for your MTA that loses millions of dollars every year for smelly subways and filthy buses. You want to keep playing this game? The people of your city and state are going to hoist you on your petard and carry you out on a tarred and feathered rail. You keep going down this road. So you go right ahead, Katie. You go ahead and test me.
Yeah, she's not going to win.
That's what's going to happen.
It's another losing issue. How even if you thought it was prudent to do that, the congestion pricing, it's a losing issue. Now that Trump's on the other side, you're going to lose because nobody likes the taxes, the tolls. I mean, people that have to commute. So it's a loser either way. But now you have Trump on the other side of it. It's even more of a loser. You should just, take your beating and go home.
Did you watch Jesse tonight? He had Howard Lutnick on.
Oh yeah.
I have never seen a Commerce secretary with that much energy.
He wants to get the economy moving. I know Tulsi Gabbard was supposed to be on, but
something probably came up. But Lutnick was more entertaining than I think even Tulsi could be.
Yeah.
And what he said, it's what he said. Trump, when he leaves office, God forbid, in 4 years, when he leaves office, wants to change the first letter of the IRS to ERS, so that Americans will never be taxed on their income again.
Yeah.
That's the goal.
Yeah.
And he laid it all out. It's not that hard to come by. Elon and Trump are now talking about, imagine, they've already identified over $1 trillion of wasteful spending. And now there's talk about giving every American taxpayer money back from the savings. Not all of it, because we got to pay down the debt. I'm not really supportive of that. I'd rather all the savings go to eliminating not only the budget deficit, but hopefully we get a balanced budget next year and we start paying the debt down.
Yeah.
I would rather see all the savings going to erase the debt. Can you imagine?
Yeah, I agree. No, I agree.
That would mean, yeah. Because at that point, everyone in the world will want to invest in the United States of America.
I think it's about taking the burden off the American citizen and putting the burden back on companies, either external companies or domestic companies. You could be a domestic company and you don't have to pay tariffs, Right. So, give me a last thought as we get out of here tonight.
Well, the last thing, we didn't have time to cover it, but maybe you'll bring it up tomorrow on your daily. What took place in Maine this past week with a transgender female pushing all the female athletes in this high school competition aside. I think it wasn't the javelin, but it may have been the high jump.
It was the pole vault.
The pole vault. Okay. Well, there you go. High jump. So I don't know what the hell they're smoking in Maine, because supposedly, I call them maniacs. Most most maniacs seem to see no problem with that. And this specific school system said they are not going to abide by the presidential executive order that Trump signed last week regarding the protection of women athlete sports.
Yeah, okay, you don't get federal funds then, right?
That's what they say.
Yeah, well,
So,
that's the way I look at it.
Mhm.
Is that, hey, you're not going to get federal funds because you can't go there and fight the culture war. Maine people deserve, they're going to get what Maine people vote for. But the federal government doesn't have to play along because I pay taxes to the federal government, right? Federal income
Correct.
tax. And so, okay, I don't want my federal tax dollars to go to abortion, and I don't want it to go to Maine's high school sport program or whatever that allows women to be mistreated in this way, because women have the right to compete, right?
Well, to compete fairly. You can't compete fairly when a woman is competing physically against a male.
Well, that's what I said. Women have the right to compete, right? Without men.
Without men in their locker room. That's right.
Well, or on the field or whatever. So,
but that's what I mean.
Yeah, the women are competing, and they don't need to compete against men.
The other point to make on that argument is this: why is it a one-way street? If it were truly about transgenderism, why are there not female to male transgenders competing in male sports?
Because they won't win.
That's right.
Yeah, we know, because with this pole vaulter last year, he competed in male pole vaulting, and he only got to 4th place or 5th place. But now he gets a gold medal, so good for him. Hey, Perry, going to leave it there. So thanks for joining me tonight for a Wednesday's edition of Tuesdays with Perry, episode
Wednesday.
106, episode 106. Thanks for joining me tonight, Perry. We'll talk next week.
Looking forward to it, Rudy. And the last word is stay tuned, because it's going to continue to be entertaining.
All right. I can't wait. Go Trump. I can't take the winning.
Trump.
As Trump said, I can't take the winning. Please stop the winning.
All right. Until next week, my friend.
All right. Talk to you later.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
There we go. Episode 106 of Tuesdays with Perry, a Wednesday edition of Tuesdays with Perry. Couldn't do it yesterday. Was too sick to make it. So we decided to reconvene tonight, which is great. I don't mind. All right. Thanks for joining us tonight. Check out my podcast tomorrow, Rudy's Revelation, live on Rumble, 10 a.m. Peace out.